Hello, in this video help, I'm going to be covering the purchase screen. Purchase, inventory, and sales are very similar in their layout, as I explained in an earlier video. This also helps you to quite easily understand the input and the way that these screens are used. This particular screen in purchase is most similar to the sales screen in that you add products to this list that are going to be used for purchase orders. And the information in this screen is also used to show the receiving of the actual items and the date that it's received, and the information for the vendor that is supplying the items, the store to which this item is actually going to be assigned as far as the inventory item is concerned. In other words, if an item is purchased, the first thing you need to understand is that you need to pick the store. If you're using multiple stores, from the drop-down list, you would pick the store that that item is going to be ordered for. Now, in most cases, when you do a purchase order, it is more about who the vendor is and is supplying it. But there is one additional thing as far as this particular product is concerned, or doing a purchase order, in that when you do it for the store and the vendor, the items are put into the inventory for that particular store where this item is being used. Now, as I indicated in the last screen for the inventory, the actual code at the end of the product ID, this was not done correctly by this particular person that was setting it up, but this would be CCFEE, and then in parens would have been the NT, or abbreviation for the nut tree, which would make all the items for that particular store indicated here. If this was a different store where it was, for example, like a web store, then it would have been the ID and then WEB for the web store for this particular location. If you have multiple web stores, then you'd have to indicate web 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, I'm not trying to be confusing about this, but when you have multiple businesses that are sharing this application online, and you need to have product from a particular store that you don't have in your current inventory as an asset on hand, then you're going to want to go look to see where those items are at. And if there's any inventory for that other store, you can look in the inventory screen and see who actually physically has those items. And what I suggest you do is you cut a purchase order from your store to purchase it from that store. They will invoice it back as a sale from their store. There it balances the information as far as in the database as to where that product was originally purchased and who had it and who purchased it from that store when you do it with a transaction on an inter-store sale. And obviously, that might be a little confusing. If you have questions about it, I can explain it in detail if you need more of an explanation. Let's talk about the actual usage of this screen. As with other screens, in this case, the sales would be a customer, inventory would be a store, and purchase would be a store from this dropdown. As you pick the store, it automatically fills in across from the items that you put in your store location screen. Let's just pop over there real quick so we can see the store location screen. Basically, what you're doing is you're setting up the basic information for that particular store, and that information is then provided to the screen that you're working within. Now I'm going to go back to the main menu and then hit the purchase screen to come back to the same screen. One of the things you want to make sure of when you're actually putting out a purchase order is that you use the drop down to pick the particular store vendor that you're using as far as the products for that particular thing. Now, obviously, vendors don't sell everything, so the particular purchase order you're doing is for that vendor and what products they may have in their inventory that they can sell you. Now, one of the initial things you have to understand is that there is a product cost and there's an average cost, but there's also a fixed price that you're going to be selling this at. So this would be the cost that you're buying it from the vendor, and the subtotal is the number of items times the product cost to give you the subtotal for the purchase. There is a average price that is taken for all the items that are purchased for that particular item, and then a shipping cost if you need to add a shipping cost for the individual item. You can also create an item in the inventory that is shipping cost if you need to. It's your choice, but I recommend that you put the actual shipping cost within each purchase order. It can be on one line for all the cost, or it can be the individual cost if you want to amortize that cost for items over the actual products that you're bringing in. So for example, you don't raise the margin on something, a large item, and then put the entire shipping cost for all the items against that one item, because it'll make a cost that's a little over what you should be selling it for when you put a margin on it. This is the actual receive date, the received quantity, and the line total. Now on this screen, there's a subtotal and a line total that physically act kind of odd. And what I mean by that is that when you receive a quantity, it will vary this number, where this one will be the summary of all the subtotal items for that screen. In other words, as the actual items are received, the summary total will be updated based on the actual items that are received. So if you're looking at this, it might throw you if you see that this is the subtotal of all the items from here, and it'd be the summary of all those. And yet when you look over here, if you haven't received everything, these two will look different because this one has not received all the items yet. Let's talk a little bit about the received items. If for some reason there is a item that was short shipped, or you received something that was damaged, as far as the item was damaged in shipment, that would require a return authorization from the vendor in order to cover the cost and the shipping and return of the item. Now what you would do in that particular case is you would go ahead and first make a note in this pop-up that there was a line item issue where this one was either short shipped or whatever it was, and these are notes that are for that vended item, and it's usually something that's related to the product not being shipped correctly, or some other issue about the product not functioning properly. When you click off of it, it'll return. Now if you want to look at the actual RMA and how it's managed, what you do is you click on the line item row and then click on the icon at the end of the row. This will bring up this screen. This is the same information that was provided for the vendor information, and the line item cost information from the portal. The next thing it's going to do is when you look at this, you're going to see the vendor part number. If there's a vendor part number for the item in that line item that is different from the ID that you're using for the product in as far as your product ID, then you would put the product number from the vendor. You would put the RMA number in, the date for the RMA when it was started, the quantity, and then the status. The status can be changed as you go by. For example, there might be a different status for different kinds of issues as far as initial call for replacement and then so forth. And these are like adding notes in here. And in addition to that, you would have the receive date when the item and the quantity when it was received back, if you received it back. Now what will happen, these will automatically calculate by the quantity plus the cost. It'll give you an RMA value of the number of quantity times the cost. So this is the money, either the money you're going to receive back or the current cost of the item summarized by the RMA number of items that need to be either replenished to you or a chargeback being made back to you where you receive the money for the order instead of receiving the items. And then the RMA total will be down here at the bottom. And you can have specific RMA notes that are run in here as far as you're managing the RMA status and stuff like that, as far as made a call today, and they said that they would ship it by Friday, blah, blah, blah. Now understand that this is for this particular product item, for this particular purchase order. This is not a global thing for all the products. It is for this specific order on POID number 2. So, and it's the actual row item. So you have a screen like this just for that purpose, for that RMA, for that one item from this vendor. When you do an RMA and you're actually going to issue an RMA, you would have RMA issued yes. You don't have to put no. If there is an issue and you're not going to do it by RMA and they're just going to return the item and you don't want it anymore, you can put done and just reduce the actual quantity in the order by the amount that you actually ordered down, say for example to 1 instead of 2, and then modify your actual purchase order to indicate that the difference to be paid would be different. Now on this screen there's also a purchase history where you can keep additional notes if you need to about this particular transaction that's related to the actual RMA data or anything else that you want to. Sometimes particular for a particular product, you might order at one time, it'll be a particular cost, and the next time it may go up by 10%. And that's important when you're going to purchase items. So this could be a running history of every time you've ordered this item, and you can look back through your system to see what you paid for it on that date. The line notes are the line notes that we were just looking at on the actual purchase order screen, where if I go back to the purchase screen, this is the line order pop-up, and that's what goes into that portal as far as giving you those line notes. So if I added a line note in here, that information now would be part of the record. So that if I go over here, you'll see that it added the line note in here so you can get easy reading for that in the portal record. Let's go back to purchase. On the actual purchase screen, there's a purchase track screen here. This is supplier notes, again, another place that you can create supplier notes. But in this case, this is the global one for the purchase order. If there are items about the purchase order itself for this particular vendor, where there are notes that you need to add to the supplier notes, then you can put them in this screen, and this is related to this particular purchase order only. Then there's the PO payments. Now in PO payments, this is just like what you would do when you're taking an invoice on the invoice screen. You would take the summary total, in this case, the $66, where you're paying the vendor that amount. You would go ahead, and now this is a locked thing, this just puts the PO ID in there. You put the date, the PO amount due, which would be the 66, the amount you've actually paid, and then there would be a balance if you didn't pay the whole amount. It would show a balance, and then how you paid it, which would be the check number, or if you have a vendor account, you could put the account information you need to put in there for that particular account, where you have an open account. The PO date is the only thing I didn't cover. You could put the PO date in for the actual PO when it is actually issued to the vendor as a requirement for delivery, which gives you now tracking for the date that you actually placed the actual physical PO order. If you have any questions about how to use this screen, you can contact me, and I can explain any of the details that you want to cover if you have any issues. The last thing I want to cover before I leave the screen, you can go directly to the purchase portal by using the Go to Screen buttons. There is a purchase report by store, where it shows all the items by store that were purchased, and a summary report, a purchase report by product, so you can look at it as far as doing a search and find a specific product and all the places where it was ever purchased, or from the same vendor when it was purchased. And then the account ledger for purchase, which is covered separately on a different video. This isn't a separate screen, but it does give you the ability to go to the purchase account ledger, which will be covered later. Thank you for taking this video.